Hey guys, today we're gonna look at budget decks. What is a budget deck, you might ask? That is simply a deck that does not include any EX Pokemon. I have to mention a few things before we actually start looking at these deck lists though. So the first thing is that the meta is currently dominated by EX Pokemon, and obviously you would have a huge disadvantage if you would play one of those deck lists. They could be used, you could use one of these deck lists though to have a little bit of a challenge, as this current ranked mode, quote unquote, as they call it, it's more like a baby mode, and everyone can reach the highest rank completely for free by just simply playing the game. So if you want to have a little bit of a challenge, so to speak, you could use one of these decks and forbid yourself from using EX Pokemon. Just a thought. Furthermore, if there's a rule of thumb here in this current meta game that you will have to follow if you want to build a good, successful deck list, and that is that your deck list does not allow you by any means to brick. So you have to play a deck in which it is impossible for you to brick. You cannot have a bad starting hand. That's the rule of thumb. If you play a deck that would allow you to brick, it has to be Gyarados. If you don't follow this rule of thumb, you simply play a bad deck. There's one more thing, and that is that there are currently only 2 decks that see some success. If we speak about decks that do not include any EX Pokemon, because as I said, the meta is completely dominated by EX Pokemon. So if you play a deck without any EX Pokemon, you will have a rough time out there. But anyways, there are decks that see some success though. So let's hop right into it. I will start off with honorable mentions, because there are only 2 decks, and we will cover them, don't worry about it. But let's start off by looking at some honorable mentions, starting off with Magnezone and a partner in crime. That is, in this case, Skarmory. So this deck has the potential to come out of the gate swinging thanks to Skarmory, because if he has a tool attached, he will do 50 damage for just 1 energy, and that is pretty fast and pretty strong. And you have with Magnezone a self-sustainable late game carry, if you want to look at it like that. It's a pretty solid deck. You can already see the problem if you have heard me talk and what I said before. You cannot play a deck that can brick. If you do, you play a deck that simply just fucking sucks. I have to say it like that, because that is how it is in this game currently. So you can already see here, you can brick. If you don't start with Skarmory at all you have left is that Magnemite, and that's too weak, that's trash. You never want to start with Magnemite. Even if you start with the Skarmory though, you are still bound to have one of your tools, which is either a Giant Cape or a Rocky Helmet. So if you don't have that, Skarmory is also a ridiculously shitty start. And there you go. You are forced to draw into Skarmory plus either a Giant Cape or a Rocky Helmet. And if you don't do, you run a huge risk to get steamrolled on, and you will lose games for completely free. That is never something you want, and this is why this deck is only an honorable mention. One more honorable mention real quick, because you could also pair the Magnezone with something else, and that would be a Hitmonlee, and you could even include Marshadow and Sudowoodo in this deck as well, if you wanted to. So it's like kinda the same idea. You want to start off with that Hitmonlee, and you want to come out of the gate swinging and deal like 30 damage to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon for just 1 energy. That's not too shabby. You also have the option to maybe start with a Sudowoodo, and if you happen to face an opponent that starts with an EX Pokemon, you can deal 50 damage for just 1 energy like that. But the damage output is overall really low. If we look at Hitmonlee, 30 damage, that's like, it's not gonna shake the world unless you kill some Magikarps with it. Magnezone, 110, that is also nothing too impressive, right? So you would rely on either starting with Pseudo Voodoo and your opponent starting with an EX Pokemon to deal at 50, or you rely on a Hitmonlee or that Pseudo Voodoo, or maybe even a Magnemite dying pretty quickly, so that the Marshadow can come in and deal 100 damage with that Revenge. But the damage output here, overall damage output, is kinda low, except for the Pseudo Voodoo start and your opponent having a Pokemon EX. But again, the same problem here occurs. You can start with Magnemite and lose the game. You can start with Hitmonlee and your opponent doesn't have anything on the bench. You never want to start with Marshadow either. And you want to start with Pseudo Voodoo, but if your opponent doesn't start with an EX Pokemon, Pseudo Voodoo is completely useless. So there are countless scenarios here in which you just have a really, really bad start and your late game is also nothing too impressive. So there you go. Chance of breaking here is through the roof, right? And the potential to start off not too incredibly shabby. That's why this deck, I even mentioned this deck, because the pairings with Magnezone are around, and the two that I showed you are the most common ones. But they have a lot of glaring issues and issues that you normally don't ever want to deal with. So now let's move on to the two decks that actually are the most successful non-EX Pokemon deck lists, which are pairings with Kangaskhan. This one right here is the second most successful deck list that does not include any EX Pokemon, and it's Kangaskhan Origin Form Palkia. So the idea is you want to start off with Kangaskhan and you come out of the gate swinging, you have 100 HP and you even have that healing from Irida because you will play the water energy. That's like the idea to start your game off. Maybe even slap a Rocky Helmet on there, and it's a pretty good start. Then you have that Origin Form Palkia, which you could also start with, but then if you start with it, you rely on a Misty. And there you go, right? You cannot play a deck that only includes Kangaskhan. You need some backup, and in this case it's Origin Form Palkia. But Origin Form Palkia is a basic Pokemon, and that means you are not 100% guaranteed to have that Kangaskhan in your starting hand. And if you start with Palkia, you have to use that Misty, and if that Misty flips tails, you are fucked. That's a huge problem. Of course, there are more problems, as this deck is pretty coin flippy. Both of your Pokemon rely on coin flips, and you know all about that, right? Again, don't think a coin flip is a 50-50. No, a coin flip is always against you and never 50-50, alright? Just a quick side note, as I haven't mentioned it in a while. But now let's move on to the most successful deck list. And it's another pairing with Kangaskhan, but a much better one, for multiple reasons. First of all, Bastiodon does not have a basic Pokemon, not something that counts as a basic Pokemon when you draw your starting hand, because Bastiodon is a fossil. So you have that Armor fossil, and that does not count as a basic Pokemon for your starting hand. So you are, in fact, 100% always guaranteed to start off with that Kangaskhan. And since you pair it with a Bastiodon, you have a solid, or in fact, the best late game pairing for Kangaskhan, right? There's no better late game Pokemon, no better stage 2 evolution line for a non-EX format than Bastiodon. So it combos really well. You always are guaranteed to start with that Kangaskhan, and you have a lot of good options to not only keep that Kangaskhan alive, because you play both Pokemon Center Lady and the potion, but you also have enough time and enough firepower to draw into that Bastion. And once you do, at least you have the possibility to deny a huge amount of damage that your enemy would deal to you. You do 80, which is not too shabby. You two-shot most things in this game. And since you have such a high survivability because of your 160 HP, and your ability that, by the way, in case you don't know what Bastion does, every time he gets attacked, you flip a coin, and if heads, then the opponent deals 100 damage less to you. And another big note here is, of course, we don't play red, right? That wouldn't make much sense here because we are not in one-shot range or about dealing a huge amount of damage anyways. We are more about coming out of the gate swinging with the Kangaskhan and controlling the late game and have something unkillable with the Bastiodon. So we don't need the Pokeball, right? We don't have any basic Pokemon other than the Kangaskhan, and he is in our hand 100% guaranteed. And in case for our draw options, in case we wouldn't be able to draw into that Bastiodon, we have Professor's Research and Iono. And there you go. Those are the most successful non-EX Pokemon deck lists currently available in the game. I hope that was informative and fun. If you like Pokemon TCG Pocket content in general, please consider leaving a follow on my channel. I would really appreciate it. But until next time, take care of yourselves, have a great day, and bye bye.